Hello there, people of the internet. So I have an elderly friend, not you. I'm sure that you're watching this thinking I'm talking about you. This elderly friend doesn't watch my YouTube videos because he doesn't really deal with electronics, like, ever. So this elderly friend is a friend that basically lives off the land. Like, he's an off-grid, off-the-land, like, still using oil lanterns and things like that for light at night and whatnot. He's just one of those kinds of guys, and I don't know if I said he's an elderly gentleman or not, but he's an elderly gentleman, and he's got a couple of milsurp rifles, and whenever I was talking to him, that's what we were talking about. We were talking about his milsurp rifles. And the reason why he buys specifically military surplus firearms is simply because the quality of rifle that you're getting for the amount of money that you're spending cannot be beat. And he needs things that will last because these rifles are things that he uses on a regular basis. He's got himself a little farm set up and he's a regular avid hunter, and he's just the kind of guy to grow and gather his own food. He doesn't really want to deal with society and whatnot. He's just one of those kinds of guys, right? And that's kind of something that I bet a lot of us would really enjoy being able to do. But this guy's a very live off the land kind of guy. So whenever we were talking about his military surplus rifles, I actually brought up my 24-47 here, and I talked about how I got this thing up and going. It's actually a very nice, little rifle and pretty accurate. And he actually has the same exact rifle. His has a straight bolt handle on it, but he has the same exact rifle. And so whenever we were talking, I was like, hell yeah, man. And he was telling me about some of the things that he uses it for. And apparently for 8mm Mauser, he's got 150 grain 8mm Mauser cartridges, or like he uses 150 grain projectiles. And he uses that for hunting medium game. And like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. And besides that, for hunting large game, he swaps over to 30-06 and he uses a 220 grain 30-06 for hunting your bigger stuff. And for hunting small game, I don't know what he uses for small game. I know for a fact that he's got one of those like military Olympia 22 long rifle bolt action training rifles. I don't necessarily know about that, if he's using that thing or not. I'm just kind of spitballing on that, but I know he has that. But anyway, whenever we were talking about the rifles that he has, and he's got more than just those there. But I asked him, hey, what's your favorite military surplus rifle? And he said, well, it depends on the application that I'm using it for. If I'm traveling up north, I'll bring my Mosin Nagant because the Mausers don't work very well. If I'm going after medium game, I'll bring the 8mm Mauser because I got a bunch of 150 grain soft points. Or if I'm going after, bears or elk or something like that, then I'll bring the old 30-06 and that's what I'll use. And I'm like, yeah, I absolutely understand, picking the right tool for the job. As a matter of fact, we preach that all the time in the gun community. You got to pick the right tool for the job because there's not one universal do-everything rifle. However, what I'm asking is specifically, what is your favorite rifle? Not from a practicality standpoint, but from just an opinionated standpoint. And this guy didn't have an opinion. He just kind of like looked at me, he scratched his head, and he said, rifles are a tool of practicality for me, and it all depends on what it is that I'm doing. And I'm like, that's like eye-opening to somebody like me. See, to somebody like me, I got this big, vast collection, and I'm just fascinated by mechanics and history and caliber, setups and just where these rifles came from and how this technology developed from percussion cap and then breech loaders and then self-loaders and then, bolt actions and like auto repeaters, and just there's so much development and history that is behind these things, and I'm just overwhelmingly fascinated by it. And whenever I think about my favorite rifles, a lot of times I'll think about where these rifles came from, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like lever actions so much, because lever action development is just such a cool point in firearms history, and whenever they were being developed and created, they were just such cutting-edge technology. But this guy, he wasn't interested in the history behind the rifles, and he wasn't interested in much of anything about the rifles other than if they fired accurately and could do the job that he needed done. And it never occurred to me that this is the case, but people collect military surplus rifles specifically for practicality purposes. And that's just like not something that I had really even anticipated before. I always assumed that if somebody's going out to buy military surplus rifles, and a couple of them, and like to collect them, that they're buying them specifically because they enjoy military surplus firearms. And in this particular case, this one was kind of a curveball, and it was just this elderly guy who wanted really good quality firearms for not a lot of money, so he got some military surplus firearms, and those are his practical firearms that he uses on a very regular basis. And to him, they're not collectibles, they're literally just tools of practicality. And I guess that is the case with like all sorts of firearms nowadays. Like if you're in the gun community, and you probably are if you're watching this video, then odds are you collect firearms both for practicality and for like amusement purposes. Like a lot of my firearms I have literally just because I really enjoy these particular firearms. However, I do have some firearms set aside specifically just for practicality purposes. Well, if you're not a gun guy or a gun nut like I am, and you literally just use them for like putting food on the table and dealing with your farm and doing the things that you have to do with your rifle, if that is all you're using your rifle for, then yeah, I could understand like using these specifically just for practicality purposes, but not having a favorite. I mean, how can you have a bunch of military surplus rifles and not have a favorite? It just doesn't make much sense to me. But like, have you guys ever encountered something like this where somebody doesn't really care about guns, but they got a bunch of them and they use them regularly just because of their lifestyle? And I imagine that those people would have a favorite, but this guy tells me like whatever the tool is for the job, then that's what you go ahead and you use. Whenever we were talking, he was like, you're not going to use, you know, a hammer to screw in a screw. You could like force it in there, but it's just the wrong tool for the job. So even though you have a favorite hammer, you would go and get your screwdriver or drill or whatever tool it is that you actually need to be able to screw that thing in, because the hammer is just the wrong tool for the job. So no matter how much you love that hammer, it's just not right for that fitting position. And he says these right here are literally just tools. And I mean, they are literally just tools. It's just wood and steel that sends a piece of hot lead flying that way at X amount of feet per second. That is all this thing does. It's got no soul, it's got no life, it's got no decisions. You know, what happens with this right here is entirely based off of the person that is pulling the trigger. That being said, I have a bunch of these tools that do the same thing, send lead flying that way at X amount of feet per second. And of course I have my favorites. So, yeah, well then again, I guess I don't really use them for all that much practicality purposes. Me running this gun channel, I mostly just kind of use them for entertainment. Like for example, I'm about to send some 155 grain 8mm Mauser at our target over there. And so for me, I actually really like these 8mm Mauser rifles. Just lots of history and whatnot behind them. But for that guy, they're literally nothing more than a tool of practicality for doing the jobs that need done. And I guess whenever I'm talking about my favorites, that also has a lot of stipulation behind it. There are some where I'm like, yeah, I would like that to be a favorite, but at the same time, I wouldn't choose that in XYZ situation. So I do understand where he's coming from, but I mean, come on, we've all got a favorite. Come on, if you got yourself a big collection like I do, you got a favorite. So what is your favorite? Let me know in the comments down below. Besides that, like, subscribe, share, description below. Link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. I'll see y'all on the next episode.
I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.